Hello, my name is Xander. Welcome back to the Python Beginners course. So far on this course, we have covered some of the straightforward mathematical calculations that we can perform in Python, utilizing some of the built-in mathematical operators, such as addition, subtraction, division. Therefore, in this tutorial, we would just re-establish all the basics of mathematical calculations in Python, and then extend that a little bit further and introduce the Python Maths library. If you have missed any of the other tutorials in this course, then just head over to the video description where you'll find a link to the other tutorials. Let's just quickly go for a recap of the Python numbers or the numeric types in Python. So integer. So if you remember, an integer or an int is a whole number that's positive or negative, and that's without decimals, and that's of unlimited length. So the integer we've been using so far in previous tutorials to perform simple calculations. The second type, float, was also introduced previously. So a float would have a floating point number, so a decimal, 35.1, 1.0, etc. So it is a number both positive or negative and containing one or more decimals. So we do have a third type, which I haven't introduced so far in this course, and we won't be utilizing it on this course, but let's just take a quick look here. So complex. So here we might utilize a complex type for mathematics related to geometry, scientific calculations, and calculus, for example. So an example here, e equals 5 plus 2e. So here we have a complex type. So something like this, we won't be able to utilize with comparison operators, for example. That's something that we have been utilizing on integers and floats. So by all means, if you are thinking about utilizing complex number types, then have a read through some of the documentation for complex, and hopefully that will then meet your requirements. So let's start off then by recapping some of the different Python arithmetic operators that we have here. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then we have the ability to utilize powers. And here we have the floor division, and then finally modulus. So those are really the core 7 arithmetic operators we have in just about any programming language. So we've already seen the usage of those throughout the different tasks and activities that we've covered so far on this course. And of course, the previous example there, we were utilizing or evaluating the calculations in the print and then printing out the outcomes. Of course, we can assign values and also cast values, if you remember. So here we're explicitly telling Python that this is going to be a float type number and storing that in a variable. We can do the same thing for integer and complex. And then we can go ahead, and if we wanted to, we could then store a calculation within another variable and then go ahead and print. Something else that we have available here is, for example, if we did a check, for example, we can utilize is instance. So we can check an instance, is not in, is instance. We can check a type utilizing is instance. So if I wanted to check what type of number was stored in this x variable here, which we know is going to be a float, let's just double check to make sure that that is going to be a float. So here I pass in x, which is the data stored in the variable, and then I define the fact that that should be a float. So what I can do now is go ahead and check that. That's what I'm expecting, and we return true. So if this was turned into an integer, so now I'm saying that I want to check this variable, this instance of this variable, and it should be an integer. So I can check that too, and that's going to return false because it's not. It's a float, of course. Right, so we have is instance, and that can be utilized in different situations where we want to check the different data types. So let's just go ahead and just print Z here, just to showcase, if you haven't already done so, calculating different simple numbers. Right, so hopefully that's established and we've done enough practice of utilizing simple numbers throughout our activities and challenges that we've done so far in this course. So far throughout the course, we've been utilizing simple numbers and assigning them to variables, for example. So it's worth noting and being aware of some of these shorthand combinations that we can use. So for example, if x equaled 1, so if the variable was storing 1, what we can do is use a shorthand, for example. So I'm using x again because I'm going to override this value in this variable here. So I can add a number to it, for example. So this is a shorthand combination here. So I'm going to take the value of whatever's in x, which is 1 at the moment, and then I'm going to plus 2. And then I'm going to return the addition of 1 plus 2. So essentially here, let's just read it like this. So x equals 1. So 1 is now stored in this variable. I take this 1 and plus 2. And then I want the outcome. So I use the equals. So this is just a shorthand way of performing calculations on, for example, existing variables. So I got the same type of I have the same type of principles here. I can use minus equals 2. So I can now take away 2. And then, for example, I can also multiply equals 2. Okay, so here we have 1 plus 2. So that's going to be 3. Take away 2. That's going to be 2 times 2. So that's going to be 1 times 2. So the outcome here is going to be 2. So let's just go ahead and print that out. There we go. As your calculations scale in complexity, we need to understand a little bit more about how Python deals with calculations. And here we're going to talk a little bit about order of operations. So take, for example, this example. So what do I mean by order of operation? Well, take this example here, this calculation, 1 plus 10 times 11. You might imagine this is going to print out, for example, 110, but it doesn't. It prints out 101. So Python utilizes an order of operations. So based upon the operator that's being utilized, Python follows the BODMAS principle, brackets first. So anything in brackets first will get calculated like that, for example. And then next up is orders, so powers, square roots, etc. then get calculated. Division or multiplication, that's left to right. So division or multiplication, left to right. And then last of all, addition and subtraction. So that's the order of operation that Python is going to utilize in order to actually calculate. So I've just typed this out for you so we can follow this. So here then, if we just follow this idea of BODMAS here, brackets first. So brackets, there are no brackets here. So orders, power, square roots. There aren't any powers or square roots. Okay, so we have division or multiplication. Right, so we're told here that division or multiplication is going to be done first. So therefore, it looks like this is going to be calculated first, 10 times 10, and then the addition is going to be calculated, so plus 1. And this is why we are resolving or evaluating this expression to, calculating this expression, sorry, to 101, because we're following this BODMAS principle. So we can do a few more, of course. So let's have a look at this example, 10 times 1 plus 10. So the multiplication is going to be done first and the addition again. So 10 times 1, 10 plus 10. So we're going to output 20. In this third example, you can see that we have brackets. We're utilizing brackets, and the order of operation here, the brackets are completed first or evaluated first. So 10 plus 1, 11 times 10. So that's going to give us 110. So hopefully you've got this already, if you hadn't already. So I to apologize. It was important for us to go through this process because you may be scaling up your calculations. And so it's important to understand there is an order of operation here when calculating. So here in this last example is a mix-up of division or multiplication, left to right. So division or multiplication, left to right. So it looks like we've got the from the left, division first, and then multiplication. So 10 divided by 2, 5, times 11 plus 1. Okay, and there we go, 55. So hopefully that was useful if you didn't know that. So let's move on to something that we haven't done, or I think we might have done previously, and that's rounding numbers. So when we're working with floats, we may have multiple decimal points and we want to control the output to the user, particularly maybe if we're working with money, for example, we only want maybe 2 decimal places. That's what we've been doing in some of the examples previously. So we can utilize 2 options here. So let's just print this. So the first option here is round. Okay, so we've got X, that's the variable, and then we just defined how many digits, decimal points we want to utilize. So 2. So the outcome here is going to be 1.45. There we go. Right, so we also have the second option, which I think I've utilized before in a previous tutorial, which was format. So the same type of principles here, we just bring in the number and then we need to define how many decimal points. So here we're going to use dot to F, for example. Same outcome, 1.5, 1.45. So there are some interesting differences between format and round, and it can be very situational where you might want to utilize these. So take this example. To begin with, so let's say X is now equal 1.00, say £1 for example. So if we wanted to output this to the screen, or we wanted to output this, for example, to our terminal, we want to show the customer it's £1. So not 1, the integer 1, we want to show 1.00. So let's just utilize format here to do that, so 1.00. Whereas if we were to use, for example, round, and this time we just need to change that to 2, you can see what's happening here is that it's not forcing us to utilize all the decimal places. So in addition to that, if we were to concatenate a price and, for example, utilize round here, you can see that we're trying to concatenate a string and a float, which we can't do. Whereas when we utilize format in the same situation, so this is going to be dot to F. Let's see what happens there. There we go. So we're allowed to output. Of course, format is converting to string. So at this point, you probably have a good grasp of calculating basic numbers with Python. So you might be asking yourself at this point, well, what about some more complex operations? Well, Python does provide, it has a built-in module or library that we can utilize for mathematical tasks. So for example, if we wanted to use pi, for example. So to access some of these over 50 different functions, let's go ahead and import. So we're going to import from the Python library, the standard Python library that we've installed when we installed Python. So what's happening here then, if you've not seen this before, import. So we're calling a package behind the scenes, the maths Python library. Okay, so this provides access, like it says here, to mathematical functions that we might want to utilize, one being pi, for example. So how we can access these? Well, first of all, we need to know what we're trying to access, I guess. So go ahead and if you have a look online, you'll find, for example, a resource like this. This is W3 Schools, Python Maths module. Here it takes you down, takes you through a list of all the different tools that you might want to utilize in your calculations. And like I said, there's over about 50 there that you might want to utilize. So how you're going to utilize this maths library is, let's just go ahead and, for example, call it. So we're basically just going to refer to it and then the tool that we want to utilize. So in this case, we're just going to utilize pi. So that's going to then store pi in X. Right, so let's just go ahead and just show that. Let's just print that out. There we go. So, for example, let's now just bring in another tool. So again, same type of format, dot, and then let's go for square root. Okay, so the square root of 4, and we can go ahead and print that out. There we go. So have a look if you are interested in or needing other mathematical tools, then have a look at something, a reference point like this, and you'll be able to bring in those other tools that you utilize. This can be a good resource. If you just click here, it gives you some examples of how you're going to utilize these different functions. Let's now put all of this new and existing information into practice by completing a few code challenges. So the first code challenge here, by default, Python shows pi to 15 places. So using round, print pi to output with only 2 decimal places. Right, so let's just go ahead again and import math module or library. So here we're going to just add the math.pi. So we're going to store pi within the x variable here. And now we just need to print this out and round it. So we can use round or format, up to you. So let's just try round and then x and 2. So this should round the number to 2 decimal places. There we go. So next up, challenge 2. Create a product sales calculator. The user will input a price of the product and the program should calculate the price of the product minus the sale discount of 20%. So this is a very similar challenge I think we did previously on another module. So let's just try this again. So we're going to enter the product price. So it's going to be a price here. I'm going to be utilizing pounds and pence, so 2 decimal points. And we should be able to calculate the price of the product minus the sale discount. So you can do this in any way you like. I'm going to go for x equals float. So I'm going to take in an input, a user input, pound and pence, and that's going to then capture the amount. So that's going to be the amount of the product without the discount. And then we've got the discount. So that's going to be y variable. You would probably want to call your variable separately or differently, sorry. So here you might call this discount. So we're going to take x, the original price, and then we're going to divide it by 100 and we're going to times that by 10. Okay, so that's going to work out the amount of discount that we're going to apply. And then z, that's going to be the new price. So let's just utilize, for example, format here. And we're going to, first of all, get the original price, take away the discount, and then we'll just place that to 2 decimal places, so .2f. So we're going to store that to 2 decimal places. Right, so now we've done that, we can now go ahead and print. So here then, I'm just going to use the pound sign plus, and then that's going to be a string. For example, the new price, so that's z. So I don't need to use string here, remember, because format's going to convert for me. So in actual fact, I can just do something like this. There we go. So I'm going to output z to 2 decimal places. Let's give that a go. So the amount 100, take away 10%, that's going to be 90. Now I did say 20% in the example, so we just need to change this number here. So let's just give that a go. So 100 again, that's going to be 80. There we go. So here in challenge 3, we're going to use the existing code we utilized or created in the last challenge. What we need to do now is utilize BODMAS principle to create the calculation for discount using just one calculation. So I think we actually already did this previously. I think we've already covered this in actual fact. So you may have created a different calculation for the second challenge. I was just capturing that. So for example, here you might take in, okay, so what we can do here in actual, we've got 2 calculations. Sorry, we do have 2 calculations. So we need to work out the discount. So what we want to do is, this works out the amount of discount, but what we want to do here in actual fact is to perform all the calculations. So y should store the final calculation after the discount. So here what we can do, instead of calculating it right here, let's go ahead now and have this change. So let's go for x, okay, minus x divided by 100 times 20. Right, and then what we can do there is we can format this. So let's do that too. So let's go for 2.2f, 2 decimal places. So let's go ahead and just format that. So what we have now is just one calculation, and this now is y. So here what we're doing is x take away x divided by 100 times 20. So what's going to be done first, left and right, utilizing BODMAS. So x divided by 100. Remember, it's left to right. So we're going to divide first, and then times by 20, and then finally take away x, the original. So that should now output what we're looking for. So 100 take away 20% is £80. Okay, so sorry for that confusion. Hopefully that you were able to work that out. Right, so let's move over to challenge 4. So we ask the user to enter the radius of a circle and then print out the area of the circle. So we're going to round the answer to 2 decimal places. Okay, let's give this a go. So let's start off by asking the user to enter the radius. So it's going to be an integer, input, enter the radius. There we go. So what we need to do now is, well, we're going to need to import the maths module or the maths library because we're going to need pi here. Right, so what we can now do to calculate this, so the area equals round. So we're going to round this off, remember, to 2 decimal places. So math.pi, let's bring that in, times, and then we need the radius, which is x, and then to the power of 2. So we're using brackets here. Remember BODMAS, so this action is going to be performed first. And then let's convert that now into 2 decimal places. Oh, sorry. That's the format, of course. So we just needed 2 here. Right, so let's give this a go. Let's just print now the area. So 100, and there we go. So we've got 2 decimal places. So hopefully here you can see the importance of the order of operation and understanding how to utilize those principles. And in addition to that, importing maths. And this is just an example again of utilizing the maths library tools to bring in pi to make some calculations. So the final challenge here, we're going to build a simple calculator that allows the user to type in 2 numbers and the operation that they wish to perform, plus, minus, divide, or times. Right, so what's going to happen here, this is going to be very simplistic. We're trying to simplify this, sorry. So the user's going to take in 2 numbers. Sorry, the user's going to input 2 numbers. So we're going to have 2 inputs. Then we're going to have a third input, and we're just going to ask the user to type in plus, minus, divide, or times. That's what we're going to do. So then we're going to take those, that data, and then we're going to perform the calculation. So go ahead and give it a go. Else, let's have a look at how this is done. So let's take in x. This is going to be an input. So we're going to ask the user to type in a number. And then let's do that twice. So type in another number. And then the third one here, so that should be a separate variable. So the third input here is going to be, and we're going to ask the user to type in one of the operators. So type, so let's just type in plus, minus, divide, times. So the user is going to type in one of these operators. So now we need to perform some sort of action. Right, so there's many ways, of course, we could do this, right? So let's just go for an if. So if, for example, z is equal to, remember we're storing string at the moment. This input is going to be a string. So if it equals the addition, then we're going to perform some sort of action, right? So the result is going to be x plus y. Okay, so at this point we can then print. So let's just print result. We could do that here in actual fact. But actually, let's just bring that out of the if statement. Okay, right, so let's give this a go. So 1 and 1 and then plus. So now we have 11. Okay, so you can see what's happening there is that we're taking in 2 strings or 3 strings at the moment. So what we're going to need to do here is take in, or we need to convert this. Now, if we use an integer here, if we convert to an integer or define integers, then it won't allow users to type in floating points. So it's up to you how you want to do this. It's irrelevant at this point, but let's just turn this in or cast this into a float. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for the second input. So we'll take that into a float. So now then, when we perform this, number to type in 1 and 1, and then plus. So we now have 2.0. Okay, so we can just move this on. So let's print after the if, and now let's utilize the elif if. So here for subtraction, print out that, or then we can divide, print that out. Oh, and then finally the multiplication. And then of course we can then finish off this with an else, because if the user doesn't type in one of these operators, we want to capture that too. You did not type in the correct operator. Right, so with that done, let's go ahead and give this a go. So 10, 10, and then let's multiply that together, 100. Right, so this time I have 1 and 1, and this time I'm not going to type in a correct operator. And you can see now it says you did not type in a correct operator. So we now have all the underpinning knowledge to get started with mathematical calculations with Python. Of course, there's a whole host of other information to learn, and by all means, utilize some time to explore some of those different modules that we started to introduce in this tutorial. It may be, of course, that you'll spend a lot of time in your career not even having to worry about mathematical calculations, but of course, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a look or utilize or practice some of these different skills. Like any streams of programming that you might be involved with, it's always good to, when you have time, to try and explore some other different types of programming. Maybe you're developing mobile applications, so have a look at web applications, have a look at machine learning applications, or do something different. And obviously that will help you explore and to look into different aspects of programming that you wouldn't have done otherwise. The outcome here is obviously you're going to have a much rounder knowledge of programming and Python. So thank you very much. Hopefully that was useful, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.